Ignition sequence start. 3, 2, 1.
Range is hot. Lock and load. It's time for the Gun Rack with your hosts, Joey and Drew.
Hello and welcome to the Gun Rack, Sonoran Desert Institute School of Firearms Technology's official podcast. I'm Drew Poplin, and we got a really cool episode in store for you guys today. Bit of a rare occurrence. We are joined by not one, but two guests, which is pretty rare for us to do. Not only that, normally the podcast consists of a bunch of bearded white guys. Today, we got two mustaches in the building, so that's excellent news. We always like seeing a little bit of that little woolly man mustache coming along. So always enjoy seeing that. But before we get into that conversation, let's first talk a little bit about SDI. SDI is an online school that helps students learn the skills and techniques they'll need to be successful in the firearms and unmanned technology industries. SDI is accredited by the Distance Education Accrediting Commission, otherwise known as the DEAC, and currently we offer two, you heard me right, two programs in firearms technology. We have the Associate of Science in Firearms Technology, so, actual degree program, that's pretty cool. And then we also had the certificate program, the Certificate in Firearms Technology Gunsmithing. If you'd like to find out more about SDI, about our programs, encourage you guys, head to our website at www.sdi.edu for more information. Now, our first guest, we've mentioned him on the podcast a few times. Mentioned him a couple of weeks ago. He even had appearance in our short-lived YouTube series, SDI Marketing Lab. If you ever saw that, there's a decent chance you didn't. So you might know him by the moniker of Mongoose, which is a moniker. It's a nickname that I'm not entirely sure how we came across. I think it was just a moment of inspiration. I took a look at him and said he's Mongoose. He is a policeman and a member of his regional bomb squad. And he also happens to be married to my sister. Join me in welcoming fellow member of the Gun Rack Mafia, Thomas. Thomas, how are you doing, man?
Doing well. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Anytime we can get the Mongoose on the pod, we gotta take advantage of that. And our second guest spent 8 years as a military police officer in the Army Reserve and Colorado National Guard, and over 10 years as a Grand Junction, Colorado PD officer, serving as a street cop and on the SWAT team. All that really just scratches the surface of his qualifications and accomplishments. But now he is the owner, founder, and lead instructor of Defenders USA, Mr. Adam Winch. Adam, welcome to the Gun Rack, sir.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're very happy that you could come on to the podcast. Before we dig into, talking with Adam and Thomas, a bunch of different stuff, I think it's important for us to, if we're kind of mapping out y'all's stories, we need to figure out how you got to where you are now. So Adam, sir, I'll start with you. Would you mind just telling us, whereabouts you kind of like grew up and how you first got into firearms?
So first of all, I think you're crazy to have two cop types on here at the same time. This might be a recipe for disaster.
Don't like those odds, but I've had worse.
Especially a cop that's growing a firefighter mustache. I mean, come on now. Okay, so my background. I grew up as a missionary kid in West Africa. So for Thomas, for you, I actually had two different mongooses, but my friends would shoot them out of the trees or off the walls, and they'd end up in somebody's pot, and they would eat the thing. And I loved those mongooses, right? They got some funny habits. They're incredible pets, incredible little creatures. So grew up in West Africa, came back to the States, immediately ran off to a military college, think like VMI, West Point, Citadel, things like that. Later joined the U.S. Army Reserves in Colorado and became an MP. And really, I just wanted to be a cop. And I figured starting out as a military police officer in the civilian side would let me get to the military side, let me get to the civilian side as a cop as quickly as possible. I didn't realize that was a really bad plan at the time. I didn't know, right? So I went in as MP, got tired of that pretty quick, and then I moved into, if you know the acronyms like ERT, QRF, SRT, PSD. So think like protecting personnel, a military SWAT team, And I was lucky enough that my reserve unit was all full of cops and SWAT cops from the Denver metro area. So I got to learn it not the Army way, I got to learn it the right way. And that was a good thing, right? Later I went to the police academy in the Denver area, and while we were in the academy, literally working out, September 11th happened, and we watched in the gymnasium there when the towers came down.
Oh, wow.
And when tower number 2 got hit, as we watched the plane come in, I kind of turned to my buddies because there's 3 of us reservists in there, and a guy who just got out of the Air Force and as a PJ, and he was in the academy. And as soon as we saw that tower come in, I turned to my buddies and I'm like, we're at war. We're going to war. And next thing you know, yep, the Air Force guy got recalled, pulled out of the class literally that day. And then it took us about 8 months to get deployed, but by then I'd become a cop in Colorado. And then about 8 months into my job as a cop, we got deployed. And so spent, I don't know, 12 or 13 months boots on ground between Kuwait, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, doing different things. And then later came back to Colorado after that and kept on being a cop and moved into SWAT and street crimes and training and yada, yada. Defenders, the company, you can see it back there, Defenders USA, started because some bad things happened to people I knew. They wanted some training. And I just kind of pulled out of my hip pocket and started doing some training. You know, the idea was I thought people needed the training that like Thomas has here, right? That my buddies and I had, because if we get more people trained, there's going to be less victims of crime. And so I kept saying that, and I kept griping that all the dumb concealed carry classes out there don't teach anybody anything. And finally, somebody in the police department challenged me, hey, if you're going to gripe about it, why don't you do something about it? So I started a company on the side and eventually grew to where I was able to take it full time. And as a kid in Africa, I always wanted to be a cop, a soldier, and own a business in America. Well, I'd done the first 2, so I ultimately was able to take this full time. And, you know, if it ever decides to not go well, maybe I'll go back to something else. But in the meantime, it's been going strong. I've been doing it full time for 10 years, and it's growing. And I love training people to, I don't know, be better defenders of themselves.
For sure. For sure. That's awesome, man. Going back a little bit, so you were MK.
Yeah, yeah, Missionary Kid. Uh-oh, you know the acronym.
Oh, yeah. Where in West Africa?
Côte d'Ivoire, or if you say it in English on an English map, the Ivory Coast.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So right next to Ghana. So I take it you know something about this.
Yep.
Okay.
I was a MK in South Africa.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
How was that?
Oh, it was wonderful. So it was a bit weird because I guess we kind of got started in that whole realm a little late. I remember I was 10 and my parents told me that we were going to, you know, become missionaries.
Right.
So, you know, I was already like preteen, teenage, you know, it took us a couple of years to raise support to
of course,
be able to get down there. So we didn't move until I was almost 16. So only ended up spending about 3 years in South Africa, but it was wonderful.
Incredible, isn't it? Incredible. I've never been to South Africa, but we had a different route. I was 3 or 4 when my mom and dad got called to ministry. And by the time I was 6, we were already in Africa, right? They were able to raise support on deputation far faster than most, it seemed. And it only took about a year and a half between that and language school. And next thing you know, we were in Africa. And boy, I grew up that way. So I don't know about you, but here in the States, when people talk about TV shows back in the days when I was young, or songs or what, I have no clue what they're talking about because I didn't grow up the way the standard American did.
Yeah, I think for me, I know that they would eventually like catch up with like some of the American media and stuff, but you know, most movies that would come out would be like 3 months delayed from when they initially
you were lucky. It would take us 3 years to see stuff, but South Africa is way more advanced than where I was. So
that's true.
You're lucky, brother. You're lucky.
Yeah. Well, you know, in my ignorance, I remember asking my parents because we knew another missionary family,
right.
You know, that our church supported that was in South Africa. So when they first told us, I remember as a kid being like, "Oh, are we going to the same village as the Cranes?" Not knowing that, like, oh, honestly, compared to where I grew up here in America, it was a lot nicer.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Forgive my ignorance about the culture and stuff at the Ivory Coast. Most of my knowledge of the Ivory Coast comes from soccer.
Yep.
It's I'll be like, oh, Drogba, yeah, that's where Drogba's from.
Yep. Les Elephants, right? The elephants is the national team there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it's French speaking, right? It was colonized by the French. They speak Parisian French. So I grew up speaking French because we started picking that up when we were 6 or so. And came back right before I turned 18. But there's 64 different ethnicities, or you could think villages or sects, different types of tribes there. So we got to know a little bit of like Jula, Douala, Abe, a couple different languages. I got little smatterings to where you could slightly communicate, but I couldn't figure out most of them. So we spoke French all the time. In fact, the only time we saw English or spoke English was when we were at home, right? And I don't know, some of the best people in the world, one of those beautiful places in the world that later, after we left, turned into a massive civil war, probably no different than what South Africa did, to where it became, as the Islamists invaded from the north, it's now a divided state between an Islamist state and a non-Islamist state, and it's kind of always on the edge of turning into another very, very brutal civil war that nobody here in America really hears about.
Yeah, I was not aware of that. Honestly, Africa as a continent unfortunately goes through a lot of those cycles of civil war, maybe a period of peace, and then it's right back to conflict.
When we were there, they had basically a benevolent dictator that ran the place, and he was extremely corrupt, but very good for the country, right? To where Ivory Coast at the point in time was the 4th most prosperous, economically stable nation in Africa. And once he died, because he was like dictator benevolent for life, once he died, immediately it started assembling, into just complete outright civil war, to where I have a lot of friends, they got their hands chopped off, they're killed, they're missing, they're raped, they're whatever, and subjugated into. So it's hard to hear the stories of that, but at the same time, some of it's still prospering, and it kind of depends on what sections you're in, whether it's the Islamic sides or not. And it's Africa. It's just the way it is.
Have you been able to go back since you initially went?
No, I would love to. My parents later, after Perestroika happened, meaning the wall came down in Eastern Germany, they got called into say Moldova, Russia, and other places. They did that for quite a while. Then they went back to Africa, going to Benin, and then they finally finished their last 7 or 8 years in Cameroon. So though I got to go to Russia and Moldova visiting them, by the time they went back to Africa, I didn't get to go. And as much as I'd love to go and take my hot little wife to see that, we just have never had the chance to go. And I'm not sure I really want to take my little family to Africa right now in those places I grew up, because it may not be the best place for us.
Well, listen, if you ever end up taking your family over there, if we're in Africa at the same time, we got to try linking up. I know it's a huge continent, but
let's hook up. Let's hook up. So but last question, I don't mean to ignore you, Thomas, but by the way, what denomination were you guys, Drew?
Protestant. A lot of the churches that are already in South Africa are some sort of Protestant because of the Dutch influence. Influence.
Well, we've got a common background. Now all we got to do is work on Thomas, because it looks like he needs Jesus.
My uncle was a missionary in Nigeria for 25 years.
Yeah.
They lived in Nigeria for they lived there more than they lived in the US.
Right.
And then my brother was a missionary in South Africa as well. So
wow.
Yeah, small world.
Yeah, incredible. All right.
If I'm not mistaken, my geography, Nigeria is closer to the Ivory Coast or Cote d'Ivoire than South Africa is.
Yeah. Nigeria is, I think, 2 countries over, right? I got friends there and all. And I've always wanted to go, but never got to. But probably one of the better countries in Africa from a safety standpoint, despite some of the wars going on in the north, because the same thing is happening in Nigeria that happened in the Ivory Coast.
Yeah. There's a very Islamic versus non-Islamic war going on, but that seems to be the same wars that have been going on since the last 2,000 plus years.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but that might actually serve as a good transition. See, Thomas, a little bit about Thomas is he's he's something worse than an MK. He's a military brat.
Mm.
Oh yeah.
You poor guy, you're getting picked on here.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Thankfully, thankfully we didn't move around a whole lot, but my dad's last station was in Virginia, and that's where my brother and I basically grew up there, but the rest of my siblings were born like Rhode Island, Belgium, South Carolina, California. I've got 5 siblings, so yeah, we my family moved around a lot, but we didn't. My little brother and I. So by the time we got there, my dad was on shore duty, so we basically stayed put there. So
wow, nice.
But,
so I take it you were in Virginia Beach.
Yeah. So
Okay.
a Navy brat, and for the first 19 years of my life, I grew up around. You walk into a store or a restaurant or whatever, and you're just seeing people in uniform all over the place.
Yeah.
Whether it's police or military, you saw a lot more military than you did any other unit, any other type of uniform. So it wasn't uncommon, and always seeing planes or helicopters fly over. That was always fun, and thought I was going to go into the Navy just like my dad, and I stepped foot onto a ship, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And they're like, yeah, this is where you'd spend your first 2 years in the Navy, down here in the engine compartment, learning how the ship works. And I was like, there's no windows. There's, I'm not good with engines. Like that doesn't, I want to hunt pirates. Like that sounds cool. On Captain Phillips and things like that. And I was like, oh, I guess that's not going to be for me. I can't be on a small boat for 9 to 12 months away from a spouse. So that didn't work out, but yeah. So
how did you end up? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so, yeah, you wanted to be in the Navy sort of growing up, or you're thinking about like, some sort of branch of the military. And then, you said why, your opinion shifted. How did that end up shifting to become, okay, I'm going to go into law enforcement?
Well, yeah. So I was looking for something else, like for college, the different majors that there were. I was like, none of them look interesting. I don't want to do accounting. I don't want to do business or arts and crafts or whatever these majors are. And I thought criminal justice, that looks interesting. What I didn't realize was how worthless a criminal justice degree is.
Exactly.
You can be one of two things. You can be a cop or a lawyer with that. Well, you still have to go to law school, but there's very few avenues that you can go. So my first professor was a Virginia State police officer, and he was great. Told us all sorts of stories. He retired as a like a lieutenant or captain or something, and so he told us all these stories, and that kind of piqued my interest. And I think it was my senior year I actually did my first ride along, and it was in a small town in Ohio, like 4,000 people maybe or something. It was boring, but I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. Like we went on one call in a 10-hour shift or something, but I still thought it was the coolest thing ever. I think we pulled over one car. But I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. And so I think that's what my shift was. I was like, okay, well, I can't do military, but I can serve another way. And I don't want to be a firefighter. I don't want to be a paramedic. I want to be a police officer. So there's nobody in my family that's ever been a police officer. So, military, there's people in my family have been military, but police was a new avenue.
So are you working patrol, or are you on a specialized unit? What do you do?
Yes. So I'm on patrol right now. That's the only thing that has ever really been interesting to me. When I was in college, I was like, yeah, I want to be a homicide detective. I want to, be on like the SWAT team. I want to do all that. And then I got to working that, and I was like, oh, you mean these guys get called out of bed on Christmas Day?
Constantly.
Like it doesn't matter. Christmas Day, there's always a homicide. Any city around the country. Or hey, you worked 5 days and then your weekend is spent on a scene, a homicide scene. Like that sounds awful. so I scrapped that idea. I got to train with some of the canine guys, and I said, "This is sweet. I want to do canine." I had a jump and run. It was a traffic stop. This guy had like a bunch of boxes of weed in the back seat, and a gun and everything, and he jumped and ran. I lost the foot pursuit. Not even gonna lie. I slipped on some leaves. I fell. It was bad. So we did a canine track, and I was left in the dust. And I said, I don't think I could be a canine officer. So I didn't even worry about applying.
Yeah.
And then I saw there was a parade or something, and I was working a traffic post, and it was hot, and I was like, who are those cool guys riding around in the Polarises wearing army green BDUs? Like, they look like cool dudes. I want to do that. What is that? And turns out that's the bomb squad. And so I applied. 2020 COVID just started, and they had an application process come out. Went through the application, the tryout, and my wife was like, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And I was like, "Let's just try it." And so I got selected, and been doing that since 2020, so about 3 years. And that's been good. So that's like an auxiliary position. So I do regular patrol 90% of the time, and then 2 days a month I train with bomb squad. If there's any type of call out that we're needed for, then I'll respond to that as well. So it's kind of like a dual role. But I'm only one of, what is it? One of 6, I think, in the department that's on the bomb squad. It's not very big. Not a lot of people are crazy enough to do that job.
Yeah.
Everybody wants the cool SWAT stuff, the cool toys and whatnot. But so that's what I'm doing right now. Not really have any ambition to do anything else, honestly.
Well, you clearly got better math skills than many of us, because you got to have math skills to do that. And 2, I mean, you got to have stones to sit there and go play with things that go bang in big ways, right? I couldn't do that. And you mentioned SWAT, right? There's no glory in SWAT, right? I thought there was. I thought it was going to be so cool in all Hollywood. And man, you're getting called out all the time. Doesn't matter what you've done. I got off a 27-hour shift one time, and boom, get called right back out. And man, after a while, you just realize you just embrace the suck and you just go to work. It's not Hollywood.
Yeah, and I mean, I've got friends who are on SWAT, and I was like, yeah, you guys are cool, and I'm glad you just do what you do, because I don't think I could be the one going through the door like with an unknown subject with a gun pointed at me. I just couldn't do that.
It's so scary.
Yeah, I mean, you do you, but I'm gonna be in the bomb truck operating the robot from a safe distance. Like, that's my job. Like, I'll be okay.
I don't know. It takes some brass ones to walk up on something that goes bang in a real big way.
Yeah. Well, there's a mutual respect between the SWAT and bomb squad, and we actually train together twice a year, and we have a lot of call outs together and stuff like that. So we help build their explosives. They teach us some cool stuff too, and let us play with their toys. So it's good. A lot of other agencies can't say that they have a mutual respect between SWAT and their bomb squad. But yeah, it's good. I mean, it's a small, the SWAT team and the bomb squad are small enough that you can build a camaraderie, like on your training days or whatever. And but there's other agencies that they don't work well together at all. And I was like, I don't know how you don't work well together. That's pretty important and necessary on a call, where you can't have your enemy working with you when you're trying to take this suspect into custody or whatever, or whatever you guys are doing. So it's fun though. We work hard, but we play hard as well. So
Drew, I got to tell you, I appreciate you inviting me on, because I think we got the trifecta of crazy going on here. So this is
Listen, I can book some guests. I may not, be knowledgeable about much anything else, but I can get people together.
Yeah, my wife, she's actually more comfortable with me being on bomb squad than me being a police officer altogether. Because the thing is, I'm sure, Adam, you've had it where when you were a cop, where you get dispatched, and what's the subject, or what's the topic, or the call, basically the headline,
Right.
Unknown trouble.
Right.
What is that supposed to mean? And that's what my wife, she's like, that just doesn't, like, that could be anything. Yep, that it's all open to interpretation. You have to figure it out when you get there. And as far as bomb squad goes, you're like, oh well, there's a package, let's go x-ray it or whatever, and most 90 times out of 100 we can figure out what's inside and what makes the thing work. But when you're driving to a call and it's unknown trouble, and you're like, well, I've got 1,000 scenarios running through my head, and I've got to figure out which one's going to play out. And then you get there and it was the 1,001st scenario. It wasn't any of those 1,000 scenarios. It's kind of, I feel like that's sometimes harder.
And you make sure you don't text the wife, hey, if there's only little pieces left, please do this with my belongings. Make sure you don't do that.
Well, that's what the bomb suit is for, so you can have a open casket.
Right, exactly. Well,
not to be morbid or anything.
I'm kind of lucky. My hot little wife, right? She's a cop too, so we can talk to each other on the same plane, and she doesn't get too worried about stuff. And I do get worried about the girl, right? She does some dangerous stuff, but it's cool to have that to where we both kind of understand each other.
Yeah.
Well, Thomas, your wife was elementary education, so it's
That's
debatable which one's. Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of want to I guess expand on this conversation, about going into these high pressure, high stakes situations. And this is a question for both of you guys. In those moments, do you feel like your mind is thinking like incredibly quickly and you're going off of that, or do you feel like it's based mainly off of instinct from your training?
That's a case-to-case basis.
Mm-hmm.
So like a emergency traffic, car pileup, person trapped, things like that, my job is to get there as fast as I can, but the fire department's going to be able to help them a lot better than I will be. Really my whole job is going to be traffic control or writing the report. But so when it comes to those, like, that will be dispatched the same intensity as a subject with a gun or a shooting or something like that. And some of these calls, like we've done so many times where it's like, oh, it's a shooting at this location, the suspect, it's a drive-by or whatever. Okay, we got to go there, secure the scene, and render aid. I think it really, like, it's a case-to-case basis. But yeah, in those moments, you're kind of like, well, for me at least, I'm like, oh, like this is real. This is my job. And like, I can't call the police because I'm the one responding. So I can't call somebody else to do it. Like that's my job. And so, yeah, there's, I think that a lot of times I'm scared too, honestly, where I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I going towards this danger and not away from the danger? But I think that's where, I know there's 2 or 3 cop cars behind me, and that's when I feel a little more courage. I'm like, okay, I've got 2 or 3 other officers with me. We're going to be okay. I don't know if that answers your question. I think it really is a case-to-case basis when it comes to how much information and who gets there first, that sort of thing. But most of the time it's either I'm annoyed driving there because I'm having to do my job, or I'm having a little bit of oh, what am I going to do? Even though I've done this 1,000 times, what am I going to do? I don't know. I'm sure Adam will say probably the opposite.
So there was a lot of instinct involved, right? I think there's a lot of pre-thought through decisions got to be made ahead of time, right? That somebody's got to go, and
yep.
Why not me than somebody else, right? At the same time, there's sometimes there's room for true fear, right? There's been times I've gone through that door, or I'm hunting that person with a gun down by the river or in the woods or in a neighborhood with a gun who's going to kill us, right? There's some real fear. Other times it compartmentalizes away because you're so focused on your task and making sure you do the right things so your buddies, right, the guys and girls that are with you, they don't take a round in the face. I think I agree with Thomas that it goes back and forth. What I found is it became more instinctual. The more I had been a veteran as a cop, and the more hard things I'd faced, and the more I'd done it, the more it became internalized. And you just did it by, I wouldn't say by instinct so much, but by instinctual training, right? Or trained instinct. And it began to just flow. And you would just do things, and you so compartmentalize away, hey, I might take a round today, I might not be going home, right? Or I got to do this because my buddy might take a round today, whatever it may be, right? Or if we don't catch these people or this person, then some other grandma is going to get raped or get shot or stabbed, right? We've got to do it. Somebody's got to go, and here my Lord, send me, right? Why not me than somebody else? So it kind of went back and forth for me to where the more I felt trained, the more I'd made decisions that I will be the one to go do this. I will be the one to take the round if I have to. I will be the one to send the rounds if I have to. These people need captured. I've been anointed. I mean, that's kind of how I looked at it. I was called to that type of work. So because I was called that type of work, then therefore I will do the very best I can to be prepared for that moment and squash the monster inside. Because I'll tell you, the cougar rises. You start going through the door, you start going towards it. You know there's bad things. There's 5 dudes sitting in that car, and you know they just want to kill a cop that day, and you're the only one there, right? I mean, the cougar rises, and you got to be smart about your tactics, but you also got to be hard of heart, or at least strong of heart. And the more you have trained yourself and thought this through, the more you do smarter things in there, and actually you work less, and you spend less time in your own head, trying to think it through, because you just do it by instinct. So I hate to give you a vague answer. I'm struggling with it. I think the same way Thomas was too here, how to say that. But I think at very beginning it was just instinct based on some training, but a lot of thought. Towards the end, because you internalized so much and you became very good at what you did, right? That you just put thought away and you let the training flow through almost on an instinctual level. And it was beautiful when you could tell that you did everything right. You didn't have to spend a lot of thought or energy in it. You just did the job, and somehow everybody came out okay. Nobody had to die that day, and that was a good feeling, right? I don't know about you, Thomas, but my first couple 10, 15 fights I got into on the street, or maybe first 50 fights I got on the street, were very muscular, very dynamic, very this or that. But the more I trained and the more I did things, whether it was hand to hand or guns or whatever, but the more you got into it, the more you just kind of flowed through it, and there was a lot less energy involved, a lot less muscle involved, a lot more technique based, a lot more feeling based, sensory perception, visual perception, and it became easy, and it less wore out the mind and the body too. And it became the same thing with all the gun stuff and the dangerous things. The more you were trained, the more you prepared, the more decisions you made, the more it just flowed, and it just became an easy day-to-day thing, and you compartmentalize the terror that sometimes you feel. And then later you stand there in the shower 20 hours later, you're washing all the grime and the nastiness off, and you're thinking, I shouldn't be here today. I should have died today. And you know what? By God's grace, we did.
Well said.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Yeah, that brings me to the next question I was going to ask anyway. We know that going through something like that can have mental and emotional toll. For both of you guys, how do you find that? How do you end up centering yourself after something like that, and still being like, well, gotta go back to work the next day, Or is it a long-term thing where you're, long-term, you work through it and you kind of just do whatever you can following that?
Oh, that's good. That's a good question. That's deep.
So let me jump in here. If you see in the background back here, there's a big stone up there. It says Officer Bill Foy, right? He was my partner, my best friend, my brother, right? And he didn't compartmentalize and deal with this well. And one day, 16 minutes after I got the last text, as I'm realizing what's going on, I'm trying to get to him, he went ahead and just he, as they say in the cop world, started his own gun, right? And I found his body. I lived near the desert. I found his body in in the desert, right where he said I would find him. I've seen a lot of cops who've done that. We have it in the soldier world too, especially those who've really seen things. And if it's not that, I've seen the cop, and I could take this out to the civilian who's been through traumatic events, right? They've been the victim of crimes. If they don't deal with it well later, oftentimes they'll drown their sorrows in a bottle, or in beating the husband or the wife one time too many, right? Or in addictions of too many video games, or secluding themselves away, or spending too much in credit, and whatever, right? To deal with the noise that's going on within the heart and the head. So, Drew, you touch on something that's a real passion for me, because I've seen and done some rough things. I'm sure Thomas has been through just as much, if not more. And if you don't center that, right, we destroy our marriages, we destroy our families, we destroy ourselves, and we change and become the people we're not. Thomas is probably, I'm presuming Thomas here, is probably like me. I used to be this nice little missionary kid from West Africa, innocent and good and kind and everything else. And within about a year and a half to 2 years of cop work, because I saw so much hate and violence and gore and this and that, I became a completely different person. And I would tell you, because it's been dealt with over time, a better person, but there's a just drastic change from the human I was raised to be. And so I would tell you that from my perspective, whether you're an EMT, paramedic, firefighter, police officer, soldier who's seen a lot of war, special operations type, if you deal, ER nurse, ER doc, ER tech, if you deal in the bloods and the guts and the gore and the hate of humanity on a day in, day out basis, right? The dispatcher, whatever it is, if you're that type of person that by profession you deal with the blood and hate and the gore of humanity, you need to get your soul checked now and then, right? It's not a bad idea. And I would tell you it's a very manly thing. Go get the counseling you deserve to get. You need to get. And oftentimes, if you're denying that type of thing, it doesn't have to be formal counseling, but you need to work on yourself. Take the vacations that you're there. Don't be the guy or girl that did what I did, who banked up all his vacation hours and just went to work all the time because it was so cool. And I just want to kick through the next door, be in the next fight, be in the next gunfight, something like that, right? Don't be that guy. Be that guy and that girl who's going to take the time away, go recenter yourself, be around people who are not cops. If you're a firefighter, be around people who are not firefighters, right? If you're a dispatcher, be around people who are not dispatchers. Go see what humanity really is like on the outside in the civilian world, and remind yourself how much good there is in the world. Because I know for me as a cop, on my weekends, I would cloister myself away at my home. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to see people. And that was an unhealthy thing to do. And so therefore, go see the world. It's not always the dirtbags you arrest all the time. Go see the world. Really, only about 8-10% of our population is truly evil and bad. And there's a massive 80-90% of our population that are wonderful, value-adding, heartfelt people. And we as cops need to go out and see those people. Also, find things that recenter your soul. Whatever it is, go to counseling. I don't know, go to church. Do whatever it is you do. Read your Bible. Play basketball or some dumb thing, right? Do something, right? Work out. Do something to keep your mind and heart centered, and know there's so much good out there despite what we may see as first responders, and that can help. It's the ones who bury themselves away who end up like my buddy Bill, and that's the last thing that's needed, right? And it's such a horrific thing, not only for those who hurt themselves, but also more so and worse so than for those who are impacted by it that love them the most, right? So you've got to center the soul. Find the way to do that. And if it means going to professional counseling, go to professional counseling. Go find the psychologists and the people that do that, who deal with violence well. And it's not your preacher. It's not your pastor. It's not your priest. It's not. Those people are really good with, when your mom gets tattooed by a bus and dies, they're good with that, right? Or if your leg gets hacked off in some tractor accident, they're good with that. Or you find out you have cancer, your mom and dad has cancer, they're good with that. Your kid dies, they're good with that type of stuff. But when you are the giver of violence, and you are the one who's always in the violence all the time, they don't know how to deal with that. And I can tell you from experience, because I went to Bible school after I came back from, left the military stuff, thinking I was going to be called to preach. And I found out very quickly that in the theologian world, they don't deal with how to counsel people who've been the givers of violence, the receivers of violence. The receivers are bad, but not the givers. So they don't know how to deal with it. So go find the professional counselors out there, get some help, or at least find ways to center your life and see the good that's out there versus the evil we saw day in, day out.
Adam, thank you very, very much. First of all, I'm incredibly sorry about your partner and friend. You said his name was Bill. I'm incredibly sorry about that. But thank you so much, because I feel like your answer was quite poignant. So I appreciate you speaking on that. Thomas, any thoughts?
Yeah, that's what I would concur. Find a hobby. That outlet is something that you can refocus yourself. Like, hey, I do enjoy doing this, and everything's not so bad. You gotta hang this up at the end of the day, and that includes the trauma and stuff that you've seen. That's one thing I've had to work on this past 2-3 years is and something my wife told me. She's like, hey, I'm your partner, I'm your helper. If something's really bugging you, you need to let me know, because I'm not going to be able to read your mind. And that's been really helpful. Just be like, hey, like, I saw this today, or I dealt with this today, I'm struggling with this. And that's when she's like, all right, I can help you, or I'll refer you to someone to help you. But one of the biggest things is you got to hang this uniform up at the end of the day and just let go. You can't be walking around the house. I mean, you can if you want, and if you are this person that does that, good for you. But I've seen the cops where every day their day off, they're wearing a thin blue line shirt and they're wearing 511 cargo pants, and they're just always in the cop mindset. And I'm like, you gotta turn that off, because it's going to destroy you. It's going to eat you from the inside out. You got to have a you got to have a personality that's not a police officer on your days off. Yes, when you go to work, you got that uniform on, you got to get the right mindset, and that's, I'm going to work. On your days off, you got to decompress, you got to do a hobby and have an outlet, something that's not police related. Hang out with, like Adam said, hang out with people that aren't cops, firefighters, paramedics, dispatchers, whatever your job is. Because that's, you'll have better conversation that's not sucking you back into the job of what you just experienced and things like that. So yeah, I concur with Adam.
Well, and thank you, Thomas. Appreciate that as well.
So can I add this? Can I add this to it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's nothing wrong with gallows humor, right? Right?
No.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
At the same time, for us, for certain types, keep it amongst yourselves, right? I didn't quite get that at first, and you develop gallows humor pretty quickly. and next thing you know, I'm saying things to Joe Jane civilian, right? And the shock and the horror, and suddenly they don't want anything to do with me or my family. And you're like, uh-oh, I got to be careful of that. So have your gallows humor. There's nothing wrong with it. Humor helps you deal with some really bad things, right? Laughter is the medicine to the soul, right? But at the same time, be careful who you share it with. Keep it amongst your own that do that profession.
the amount of shin kicks at the dinner table I've gotten, from my spouse of, hey, don't say that, or that was too far, or whatever. And I'm just like, oh, just how I talk. But yeah,
it sounds like you better keep that girl. She sounds smart.
she's pretty cool.
maybe invest in a pair of shin pads. Yeah. So I want to shift a little bit. Adam, I want to talk to you a little bit more about Defenders USA.
Okay.
So you started it in 2010?
Yeah. Probably in 2009, something like that. I did it for 3 or 4 years part-time as a cop, really just for fun, and then later for pizza money. And then it got to where ultimately I'm like, okay, I can go either way here. And I was able to take it full-time, and it's been growing and growing. So yeah, started out, I think 2010. It didn't become a formal entity known as Defenders USA until 2013.
Gotcha. You also, if I'm not mistaken, you created Crosswind Precision Marksmanship Academy and Shadow Defense Group, or
No,
did you work there?
I'd actually hired a former cop that I used to work with to help teach like long range precision stuff.
Gotcha.
And then at some point he's like, dude, I'd rather just start my own school. And he's like, but will you help me? So what it was, he started Crosswind and I became he and I were the primary instructors. And then I started bringing in some of my own other instructors to help with that because they're way better at the long range precision stuff than even I am. And I mean, they're like sniper types, right? So we did that. And at some point, he got tired of it. He went on to a really high paying job that's something else. And he basically wanted to get rid of it. So I bought it out from him, I don't know, 4 years or so ago. So we also own Crosswind Precision Marksmanship Academy, but I'm just kind of slowly phasing that and rolling it all under Defenders.
Thank you for clarifying that for me. I think one of the more underrated aspects when you're creating a business is figuring out the perfect business name. So out of curiosity, how did you come across, how did you end up deciding on Defenders USA, and about how long did it take you?
The Defenders part was pretty easy. My whole calling in life, as I've seen it, as I've felt the call, was to be a defender of life. Later, when I'm sitting there going, okay, what do I want to do for other people, right? I want to help them learn to defend themselves better. I want less victims of crimes. I want less Thomases or less people like my wife having to go help them on their bad day, right? Help them be their own cop in a sense. And I just got thinking about it. I'm like, I always wanted to be a defender. You want to help grow defenders. Why not just call it Defenders? And then I went, well, I like America. I love America. So let's call it Defenders USA. Now, as I'm starting to get calls from around the world, right? Sometimes people go, well, if it didn't say USA, because we're not terribly fond of Americans, right? If you're, say, from France or whatever, some of them love us, some of them hate us, right? But that's where it came from, is I just want to build defenders, people that can defend themselves better overall, and God bless America and Defenders USA.
And Defenders USA, correct me if I'm wrong, that was your first time being a business owner, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what were some of the, I guess, like the biggest hurdles that you faced, being a first time business owner?
All right. So I was always just a knuckle dragging cop or soldier, right? I could sell you a bullet or a handcuff in a heartbeat, but selling a service, selling a thing goes completely against my nature. I grew up as a missionary kid. You give everything away, right? I grew up as a cop. You give everything away. You don't charge them for, arresting them and taking them to jail, right? So, you don't ask people for money for doing your job. So that's been the hardest part, is learning how to run a business in America. I had to tell you, I thought some of the military stuff I did was pretty tough. I thought the police world, SWAT world was pretty tough. Being a business owner in America is the toughest, hardest thing I've ever run in my life. Wow. I had no idea. My new heroes since I've started this company have become, along with all the law enforcement and everybody else, all the Thomases in this world, my new heroes have become the American businessman or businesswoman. And really, you could translate it to any business person, right? They deal with more heartache and hardship than I ever thought could be. I thought it'd be simple and easy, right? We provide incredibly great services. We phenomenal training. So I figured everybody's going to beat down our door and just come to us. Oh no, oh no, oh no. And all the management of this and the books and all the emails and yada yada. I tell you what, that's tough for somebody, and it helps if you're bright. And I'm me, so it makes it hard.
Yeah. So transitioning from military to law enforcement to becoming a firearms instructor and a business owner, would you mind explaining how you would define your approach as a firearms instructor?
Yeah, good question. So I had a gun use as a cop, right? And after the whole thing was over, I realized, in fact, in the moment, I recognized that all the training I'd done, right? Military, police, I'd been through all these SWAT schools, you name it. And I was the gun guy, right? I was one of our better, if not one of the best shooters in our department. And more training hours than I can explain. And I realized my defensive gun use as a cop did not fit my training, which was odd to me, right? And so I started seeking outside of the law enforcement world and the military world for training. And from there, I was shocked. And I mean, no disrespect. I was shocked how poor of a shooter I was. And I was one of the better ones in our department. We have a good sized department. And how poor of a shot the vast majority of police officers are in America. Right? Look at gun uses by law enforcement officers in America. They hit on average 18 to 23% of the time.
Ooh.
I'm gonna tell you right now, that's a shameful stat, but that's the where law enforcement training is today in America. Do you know civilians, when they get into defensive gun use, they hit with far more, 2 to 3 times more accuracy in their gunfights than cops do. And oftentimes we're talking people that have zero training whatsoever, none, right? They just picked up a gun and went bang with a gun. So my approach became this: as I went off to training, I realized how poor and terrible, how humbled I was when I went off to training thinking, SWAT dog, I got this. And I realized quickly how I didn't know how to shoot. And I thought I did, right? Cop, everything else, SWAT guy. I was humbled by it. And my goal became that, hey, fights are very dynamic. They're very quick. They're usually not standing there static on a line, pulling the gun very quickly and standing there shooting. It's often very dynamic, moving up and down, rolling or rolling on the ground. So my philosophy of training has come from the aspect of you've got to fight for your life. It's probably not standing there static. So let's learn how to use a gun in very realistic ways that happen the way I experienced and what I've seen of others that I know that have been in defensive gun uses, both civilian, military, and law enforcement. Let's make it more like that, and let's build that. Now, first, you got to build the fundamental skills, whether it's handgun, rifle, you got to build all that. You need to get a good first draw to shot, right? Be able to manage recoil. You have to have all the fundamentals. So we do a lot of that, but then I build them up to where now we're doing extremely dynamic stuff, oftentimes at great distance or very close quarters as you do it in all sorts of topsy-turvy situations, because that's what I experienced. And that's what I see happens in some gunfights that are out there. Therefore, if we can build those skills into people, that's what I want to do. I want to build true defenders. I don't want to be people who can just shoot paper and shoot paper really well. I want to build a defender for life. So that means building the heart, the mind, and also going far above and beyond the static range play that I see normally is out there. Because when your day comes, we don't know what it's like. And so therefore, let's build you as best as possible.
So you actually answered 2 of my other questions within that answer. So that's like 3 right there. So round of applause, sir. Well, I was going to say, I actually watched a video of you doing a training session, and you were actually talking about, the movement and, shooting from awkward or unconventional places and poses. That was something I thought was really cool because, it isn't necessarily something I feel like you see a lot. And you're right. If you're in a situation like that, I feel like there's so many factors that you do need to be dynamic and adaptable.
Yeah.
And you kind of mentioned it before, or at least a little bit. I just want to clarify, when you have someone that's complete newbie, obviously you want to start them with the fundamentals built up.
Absolutely.
But because it's a pretty prevalent thing in the gun community, oftentimes people think they're at a certain level when they're maybe not quite there. So do you tend to start with everyone there at the beginning and then, okay, let's work up? Or do you judge it sort of person by person? Okay, this much, so let's add on to that? Or
good question, right? It kind of depends, right? If you sign up for, say, you came to one of our, growing and mastering handgun fundamentals, that's generally where we're going to be. But occasionally, because the really best shooters out there, they're always coming back to the fundamentals, right? So occasionally I'll get some really high-end shooter in a fundamentals class. And if I see they're already beyond this, we'll do whatever tweaks we need to do to make it truly as tight as possible. And then with that particular person, I might go a little bit further, right, than the average class. But if they come to like a speed, accuracy, and movement class, which is a little bit more advanced, and let's say they're not quite as ready for that, now I got to slow them back down and bring them back down to fundamentals. Because oftentimes people come to classes thinking they're more ready for it than they realize.
Yeah.
And then they realize, okay, I'm not quite that ready for it, right? Or let's say you're going into one of my advanced fighting handgun classes, right? Now you pretty much got to be a ninja already before you get there, right? So, if you're ready for it, great. Now, I've had people like let's say I trained a tactical team down in Colorado. And those guys all come in and they're already ninjas. So for those guys, I started at the very beginning. We went right to the very top of what we do and started right there, right? Was training a police department here this last month where I'm at in Arizona. right? And a couple of those people came in. I mean, they were solid, just ninjas with guns. We went straight to the top with that type of stuff. Others came in kind of mediocre, so we stayed in that area. And others came in, you're like, okay, we need to kind of go back to the very beginning of kindergarten here. So we went back to that. So it's kind of individualistic. It's based on the class. But if I have a group where, like, I'm doing a thing in Salt Lake in August with Jeremy Horn, if you know who that is. So that one right there, it's all kind of ninjas with guns. So we're already going to go straight to the very top with it. And if I've got to go back and fix a few things, we're going to do that to get the safety or the technique solidified. But if not, we're going straight to the peak with that one. So I hate to make vague, but it's somewhat dependent on what the individual and the group skill is.
Gotcha. And you mentioned that you guys at Defenders USA offer a bunch of courses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started the thing, but there's a whole bunch of really smart people with this company, right? We got an instructor in Texas, we got 2 in Montana, like 5 in Colorado, we got 3 of us here in Arizona. So there's a bunch of us. And man, I'm just lucky they haven't fired me yet, even though I'm technically in charge, right? But they're pretty smart. So we do everything from literally teaching handgun to from Grandma Good Cookies to literally special operations SWAT team type stuff, to where a lot of fighting rifle type things, to where we have an incredibly robust, like long range precision sniper craft type training. And the people that run that are way smarter than I am, right? So those guys run that. I'm kind of, when it comes to long range stuff, if I go to it, I'm kind of the coffee go fetch them guy, the helper, more than anything else, because though I can do it and teach it, they're way smarter than me and better at it. And it's their interest, it's not mine. So those guys teach that. But it kind of depends on where you're at, where we're going, and who's teaching it. And I kind of run a circuit. I think Nebraska. I'm in Colorado this coming weekend. I'll be teaching there. Montana, Texas, Missouri, Kansas, Arizona, Utah, kind of running around a bit. But we have a lot of things we do. If it's guns, basically, we do it. But we also do a lot of corporate training. Like this weekend or this week, I'll be doing some non-gun corporate training for real estate agents. Be teaching a bunch of teachers in Iowa here soon with another group. We do a lot.
And because you mentioned the team, I'm going to take a quick detour. You have a bit of an infinity gauntlet of a team. How did you form some of those connections?
So in almost every case, in fact, in every case, they start as they came to a class, right? They were either very good at it already, but they'd heard about us, and we've grown quite a name in the training areas that I've lived in and trained at, that got a good reputation, and they came as students, and they either were pretty high-end individuals already, and then as I watched them grow, or as I watched them and got to know them, I started becoming interested in them. I had 1 or 2 that came to me going, "Hey, would like to work with you," but the others really, for the most part, I found them in a sense. They came to training, and I just realized they were the person, right? They were the guy, they were the girl, and I'm more interested in their heart than I am their skills, right? Any monkey can learn to shoot, probably not well, but they can learn to shoot, right? But it's hard to grow the heart, and these are just incredibly wonderful people who have a high degree of skill and the passion to give it to other people, and I could see that in them, and I saw their growth constantly, and I got them. I take them as far as I can, and I always push them out to other really world-class instructors too, so they can learn from as many people as possible. And then, when I found those extremely high-quality people, I do everything I can to con them, trick them, whatever I can, hijack them into Defenders. And you know what? So far, they've been dumb enough to stick around, and I'm just lucky to have them.
Well, I did want to give a shout out to one of your team members individually, Russell.
Yes.
And that's because he has maybe the best bio I've ever seen on a website. Do you mind if I read a excerpt from it?
Oh boy, go for it. We keep talking about taking it down, but go for it.
No, first of all, I think you should keep it up. It's hilarious.
So I wrote that out of frustration like 3 years ago, just so you know.
Yeah.
And by the way, he's a Mensa level genius. total Joe Jane civilian, and he's one of the best long-range shooters and long-range instructors I've ever met in my life. Like, people the gun world thinks are the greatest of the great, go see Russell because he's that good. Anyways, go ahead.
Well, for our listeners and for Thomas, if you go to the Defenders USA website and to their About Us section, it talks a little bit about who's who, what their background is. Apparently, Adam, you guys are struggling to get Russell to write his. So
yeah, that dirtbag.
Yeah. So it says Russell can't seem to get around to doing his own bio despite repeated requests, so I'll help him out. And maybe these first couple sentences I want to be written on my tombstone one day. He's going to die from cigarettes and monsters. He needs Jesus badly. He wears way too many sweatshirts and heavy long sleeve shirts when it's blazing hot out because he's for real freak. He's the enemy of the razor because he thinks his giraffe neck might shrivel up if one touches it. And it goes on and on. Just this thorough roast. But then it ends up, I might break his legs if he doesn't do a real bio for himself soon. But until then, he is one incredible long-range instructor that most of the best precision shooters and professional sniper types need to learn from. And I genuinely respect and love this guy. So wonderful bio. When I read that, I knew I need to include it on the podcast. I figure listeners would enjoy hearing that.
You should get him on, right? The man's brilliant. He says really, really big words very, very fast, to where even I am sitting there going, huh? Right? And occasionally I have to write crap down and then go look it up later to see what it actually meant. He's one of those people that he knows he's very smart, but he doesn't realize how smart he is.
Mm-hmm.
And so he talks a level to where people are sitting there like, like a puppy dog, like, what did he just say? What did he mean? And your brain is always 3 or 4 or 5 paragraphs behind him trying to catch up and get it all. And he's brilliant. He's hilarious. Your audience, oh my goodness, they would learn so much. And if you want the tiniest nuances of gun stuff and shooting, and yeah, he's the guy. He's the guy.
Yeah, we definitely might need to do that. Especially since we just threw him under the bus a little bit. Russell, if you end up listening to this, we love you, man. You're welcome onto the pod.
Russell, you dirtbag, write your bio.
Yeah, it's been 3 years already. But so back to Defenders USA. One of the courses that caught my eye was your Defender series.
Yes, sir.
Would you mind just kind of going into, what's involved with that course in particular?
Okay, so the first part of that is really a very in-depth legal seminar. Granted, it is for the state of Colorado because that's the laws I know deeply and well. But I've expanded it to a couple other states to where we get into it. I don't know case law as well in other states and some of the laws as I do Colorado, but it goes very deeply into that. After that, we start just going into really mindset, heart set, you name it, tactics, understanding things about guns and those. Then we spend a very extensive amount of time building the fundamentals or tightening the fundamentals of shooting. And I'm talking right now, we're not talking fighting with a gun. We're talking just, grip, stance, platform, trigger press, sight picture, dot, optic, whatever, and really building people up to be very good, competent shooters. Then we take it back, and this is over a course of several days. Then we go back to the classroom, and now we get into, okay, the second you go bang with a gun, what should you do? What should you expect? What's going to happen to you on a societal level, social level, familial level, financial level, legal level, spiritual level, all those types of things. How's it going to change your life? How do you mitigate that? We get into what are the best firearms and types of gear and ammunition for the defensive life and why certain ones are bad and why certain ones are good. And it goes so in depth. We get into tactics, like if you're in a gunfight or a bump in the middle of the night in your home happens, what do you do? If you're with your family, what do you do? We have extremely in-depth discussions. We go back out to the range and we keep graduating from where we were in the fundamentals course to where now we start getting a defensive use of a gun from a fighting perspective. And now there's movement involved, speed, tons of very fast recoil management, acceptable to precise accuracy. We get into defending others, right? Because so far, the vast majority of gun training out there is just you pulling guns, shooting because maybe you're shooting, right? But here, how do you shield, control, and move people if you had to? It's your children. It's whatever else. What do you do if there's things in your hands, like your cell phone, your groceries, whatever, and you got to go to a gun? What do you do if you're pumping gas? How do you use it this way? What if you have multiple assailants? How do you go back and forth if you need to? We get into close quarters type stuff. What if somebody's on top of you? They're trying to take the gun away. What do you do? Your gun goes down. How do you handle this? How do you shoot non-dominant? It's just a graduated course that goes further and further and further. It's pretty extensive. And the idea is it's a series of courses over 2.5 days or so, or 3 days, depending on how much time I have with them, to where how can we hit the complete area of being a defender of life? Understand, and I don't mean to go long here, but understand, I think you have 3 responsibilities when it comes to being a defensive person or a gun owner. 1, you must know the laws of your jurisdiction, as well as the Johnny Cochran who's going to come for you. As Thomas knows, you pull a gun in defense of life, whether you use it or not, whether you shoot somebody or not, right? You're going to face legal consequences, certainly legal scrutiny, and very likely, more likely, civil consequences, right? So you've got to prepare for this criminal and the civil aftermath that's there. So you've got to know the laws well, because the second you go bang with a gun, Johnny Cochran's coming for you. And if he's not, Johnny Cochran Jr. or Sr. is coming for you, right? So after you know the laws well, and that takes some in-depthness, you can't get that in your standard concealed carry course. You've got to know your laws well. Next, number 2, you must be mechanically, if not, I tell you, expertly proficient with your defensive tool. Whether it's your gun, your pepper spray, your knife, whatever it is you decide to do, you need to be proficient with it. And I would tell you expert, because the second you got to pull a gun in defensive life, it's going to be extremely dynamic, very quick. And with every round you send out of a gun, there's a lawyer attached to it. And there's a life change that happens because you pulled the trigger. So you must be so good with it, you can get it done in the appropriate amount of time, but also not spray and pray, right? 18 to 23% accuracy in a gunfight's a bad idea for a lot of reasons, right? So how do you use this gun well? How can you be mechanically proficient? That's a perishable skill, so you got to update that on occasion. So back to it. 1, know your laws of your jurisdiction well. 2, be mechanically, if not expertly proficient. 3, the last thing you need to do, and I'd tell you is just as important as the first 2, you must be prepared for the massive emotional, mental, psychological, physical, financial, societal, religious, you name it, aftermath that is coming. The second you go bang with a gun, your life will change. It will change. It absolutely will change. It's the reason why when cops get in shootings, within 3 to 5 years, they're outside of law enforcement, because it changed their life, right? It will change your life too. If you've been married, I don't know, let's say Drew, or let's say Thomas, right? Thomas says he's been married. So let's say he's been married for 50 years and that girl supposedly loves him. The second he goes bang with a gun, and it changes his life within about 2 to 3 years, there's a high likelihood, even after 50 years of love and families, they are no longer going to be together. Why? Because it changes him and affects him so much that girl, because she's smart, goes, I didn't sign up for this guy. I signed up for the other guy, and this guy is no longer there. Therefore, I'm going to go find me a new one, right? And that happens. We destroy our marriages simply because we defended our lives. So you must prepare for that massive aftermath that's coming. Because if you don't get to live the life you deserve to live. You don't get to be the person that people need you to be. And now we drown our sorrows in a bottle, all the things we talked about. So going back to it, there's 3 things you must do. Know your laws well. Mechanically build the skills of your defensive tools. 3, prepare for the aftermath. So the Defenders series and everything Defenders is about is far more than the gun. We're here to build defenders. So if I can build you in all of those areas, and that's a tiny synopsis or capsule of what we're doing. Now we build true defenders. And that's the idea behind everything we do at Defenders.
No, that sounds awesome. And that's one reason I wanted to talk with you and bring you on the pod, because I appreciated the practical and, I guess, holistic approach that you guys take at Defenders when it comes to firearms training, because that's something not a lot of people go into. It's, I guess, the aftermath and the consequences of having to defend yourself. So I appreciate
and take Thomas sitting right here, right? Guys and girls, you got Thomas here. You're sitting in the presence of a hero. Understand, he signed up for this stuff, right? But Joe James civilian didn't sign up to get attacked that day, or to get raped, or to get stabbed, or somebody to try to shoot them. So the heroes out there, it's hard enough for the heroes, right? The Thomases who signed up for this. It's hard on the psychology, on the everything. But now imagine you're Joe James civilian, right? You dig ditches, you work in a hair salon, you do accounting, you do something, right? And suddenly the most horrific thing in the world happens to you. And if you're not prepared for that, even if you dominate the gunfight, you just get lucky, you win. And that happens. Imagine what it can do to you in so many of their areas. So if it can affect cops in a severe way, and it's usually not the gunfight itself, it's all the other stuff. Imagine what it can do to the person who's not prepared here. So if we can build the bang skills, but build these skills too, wow, we can save a lot more marriages. We can save a lot more people. We can bring far more joy to their grandkids, to them, to everybody else, because we built the overall person, right? And not everybody can be a Thomas. So therefore, take your time to build yourself. So if your bad day ever does come, at least you survive with the best possible chances for your long-term benefit, not just the fight itself.
That's a good point. I'm glad you added that. And he's totally right, Thomas. There's no one like you. So, real quick, I want to do a rapid fire round of questions for both of you guys. All right. And, I want this to be off of instinct. First thing that comes to your head, we're going to book through these. All right. So, question 1, Bugs Bunny or Mickey Mouse?
Mickey Mouse.
I didn't grow up in this country. I don't care.
Question 2, cold weather versus hot weather?
Cold weather.
Neither.
Question 3, Pepsi or Coke?
Coke.
Oh, people drink that crap? Coke. Yeah, absolutely Coke.
Question 4, first firearm?
Glock.
Oh, okay. So I'm embarrassed to admit, dumb kid, right back from Africa, didn't know anything about it. I went out and bought a $189 Jennings.
Oh,
Wait, you asked what was our first firearm?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood the question. My very first firearm was a Mosin Nagant, a Russian bolt action rifle.
That's a unique first firearm.
That's cool.
My dad got them for like $110 a pop, and got all my siblings one, and I was dumb and sold it. So
okay, Glenn, I see you, buddy. So, if you only had to choose or only got to choose one firearm for the rest of your life, what firearm would you choose? Adam's holding up a HK hat.
I would say the AR-15.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'd go HK if I could only choose one. Man, lugging around an AR all the time gets old. But yeah, probably that. If not, VP9. HK VP9 all day, every day.
Love it. Love it. All right. So outside of firearms, what is your favorite hobby?
Video games.
I'd say working out and smacking around the wife. Having fun. Picking on the poor girl because she's tough, man. She's tough.
Oh, favorite movie?
Does a trilogy count?
I'll take it.
Lord of the Rings.
Ooh, that's a good choice. Ooh, probably if we're allowed to do a series, probably Band of Brothers.
Ooh, both of those are really good. Favorite meal?
Steak, baby, steak.
I'm a fan of anything my wife makes. Gun to my head.
There you go.
I'd say anything she makes is my favorite meal.
That's a solid answer, brother-in-law.
She introduced me to the southern way of cooking, and I love it. So,
oh, dude,
yeah.
You lucked out.
Yeah.
ooh, fried chicken all day.
Yeah,
she does.
It's nice.
She does a pretty good fried chicken, though. And last question. So, Thomas, you are probably familiar with this. Adam, I'm not sure if you're familiar. One thing we like to do on the podcast is we have a segment called Tales from the Range. And basically, they are funny or cautionary stories that I've cultivated from internet threads back in 2005. People having like these experiences out on the range or in gun stores or out hunting, anything like that. Typically, we try to keep it funny, but oftentimes that line gets blurred between funny and terrifying. Do either of y'all have a tale from the range that you'd like to share?
Something funny, like
yeah, and you can't use me as an example.
Oh no, you're fair game.
I've aired all my stuff out on this podcast, sir.
Whatever.
I mean, I'm not gonna be that guy, but it seems like I've had nothing but pleasant experiences on the range.
Well, that's good. That's good. We'll We'll pray for your for that to continue.
Okay, I'll give you one.
Okay.
So I just turned defenders into full time, right? So I'm still kind of a newbie to teaching civilians. I hadn't done that much, and I got this big long line of students. This is in Colorado, and I don't know, 16 or 18 students that day, or for that whole week in a whole defender series. And one's a doctor, right? You got like 2 different medical degrees, and she's on the line shooting, bang, 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 bang. First day. We talked about safety, this and that, but it's summertime. And of course, I did the wrong thing because bang, bang, bang. I look over at her because she was doing fine. I look over at her. She's down the line and fingers on the trigger, and something must have bit her on the side of the head. She's got finger on the trigger, takes the muzzle, goes, starts itching the side of her head, finger on the trigger of her loaded handgun. Of course, I did the wrong thing, right? She's 6'8" people, 5 people away from me or whatever. And I go, ah! And I jumped, right? I screamed like a little girl and I jumped, which should have and could have caused a boom sympathetic reflex with her startling because of my little high-pitched little girl scream when I jumped. Well, she didn't. I grabbed her hand, right, quickly, moved it away from her head, and carefully pulled her finger off the trigger. And then we had a come to Jesus moment, talk about it, right? And thank God that woman, because I screamed like a little girl, didn't blow her own head off. A doctor, a medical doctor, you should know better, right? So I did learn one thing that day. When you see somebody do something dumb on the range, don't freak out. Don't make noise. Carefully go. Quickly, carefully remove it instead of scaring people.
That's some solid advice, though, because I know a lot of people that would react like that. I'm glad that everything was okay, but oh my goodness,
I just thought of my story.
Okay.
First time going to the range, it was an outdoor range. I was with my dad and my brother. One of my brothers. First gun I ever shot was a Lee Enfield. British Lee Enfield from World War II. Awesome gun. Well, we get there, and my dad, somehow I missed this. My dad didn't bring any hearing protection. He goes to the person in the lane next to us and asks them for a cigarette. Mm-hmm. And I was like, did I hear that? My dad doesn't smoke. He doesn't drink. He doesn't do any of that. Did I hear that right? My dad asked for a cigarette. He asked twice. The guy moved his thing, gave him a cigarette. And I'm like, what is he doing? My dad doesn't smoke. He starts unwrapping the filter of the cigarette and puts the filters in his ears as hearing protection. And that was probably the dumbest thing I've seen, because that's not going to work. It's just not. So from then on, he always had hearing protection with him. But yeah.
Yeah.
When in doubt, you can use a cigarette butt, I guess. I don't know.
Are you absolutely sure that man is not from North Carolina? Because that sounds like something that happened in our part of the woods.
No, he's a quote unquote dang Yankee.
Yeah. Those were awesome, guys. Thank you both so much for hopping onto the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. We've got into like some serious heavy stuff. It's been fun. So I just want to thank you both. Guys, if you want to keep track of Adam and everything he's doing with Defenders USA, of course, you can follow them on Facebook, Instagram. They have a Rumble. And you guys also have a YouTube that has grown pretty massively in the last year. I forgot what you said your subscriber count is right now.
It's just under 9,000. We only had like 600 or 800 probably 4 or 5 months ago. I finally decided to stop trying to avoid all that stuff and actually try to spend time in it. And I got some incredible team members that took all my dumb stuff and edited it to where it made it pretty good. So it's catching fire. If you guys want to subscribe to our Defenders YouTube channel or a Rumble channel, we'd love to have you. Come to our Facebook or Instagram. I don't know much about Instagram, but I'm trying to figure it out. But we'd love to have you. I'd love to see you in courses. Please come. We do a lot of good stuff, and really we just want to build as many defenders and survivors as possible.
For sure. And definitely go subscribe to that. I can say, because I checked out their YouTube before doing this interview, it's a really, really solid YouTube channel. Got some good advice on there. So definitely check that out. Your website is www.defenders-usa.com.
Yeah, you have to have the dash, defenders-usa.com. It's a brand new website. It just came out this week because our old one was a dinosaur and we finally killed it last week. So this one's not completely perfect yet. There's a lot coming to it, but we're even going to have an option on there for if you come to my classes in Arizona, you come to our fundamentals, we're actually going to set it up to where you can name your own price, right? I just want to reach as many people as I can. I don't want the price to be the gate, the key thing that keeps them out. So we're gonna let them name their own price. Just come see with the quality, come see what you're gonna learn, and it'll probably move you into more things later. But yeah, so come see us. We'd love to have you.
Well, you guys heard it here. Go check that out. Adam, thanks so much for hopping on chat, man. Thanks for reaching out, and definitely wish you guys at Defenders continued success.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And Thomas, Mongoose, I'll see you in a couple of weeks, buddy.
All right, bro.
All right. Thank you guys so much.
Thomas, a pleasure to meet you. Be safe out there. Truly a pleasure to meet you. Drew, thank you for this. It's good to be a part of, see what you're doing.
It was an absolute pleasure on my end, guys. All right. And so that has been the Gun Rack. All you Gun Rack Mafia out there, have fun, stay safe, and we will see you at the range.
Sonoran Desert Institute is an online school accredited by the DEAC. It is headquartered at 1555 West University Drive in Tempe, Arizona. For more information about how you can craft your firearms future, visit sdi.edu.